Okay, good afternoon. My name is Paul Adamson. I'm a board member of the CER, and I'll be your moderator for the next 90 minutes. This session is entitled Asserting Europe's Normative Power. Those of you with reasonably long memories will remember when a gentleman called Jean-Claude Juncker was about to become president of the European Commission in 2014, he said there would be, quote-unquote, a standstill on enlargement, no new member states in the following 5 years of his presidency of the European Commission, because we had to, in his words, digest those members who had joined since 2004. Seemed like a long time ago. Fast forward 10 years when Mrs. von der Leyen is starting her second term, then the rhetoric has obviously dramatically changed. I will introduce those speakers in a second. As a broad overarching theme, I think what we should try and do in the next hour and a half is explore to what extent the current approach and the methodology of discussions on enlargement are still working. Are they open for some kind of fine-tuning and tweaking? I'm using diplomatic language, given one of my speakers on my left. Point one. Point two is this concept of reverse enlargement dead in the water, strangled at birth, or is it possible to revive it in some shape or form? Reverse enlargement being kind of reform membership first and reform later. And then last but not least, something which is not really discussed very much in the current debate, although I may be wrong, is different ways in which accession countries in particular, in very informal ways, but very important informal ways, do take part in EU activities and programs and joint ventures and projects, which doesn't seem to get reported very much. We're not talking about, obviously, full formal membership, but it's nonetheless, it does show that the EU is trying very hard to keep the door open to all these different candidate countries. My panel, finally, is on my left, Maida, who's the Minister for European Affairs of the government of Montenegro. Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze, I'm sure I mispronounced that, forgive me, you must get used to your name being mispronounced. The People's Deputy of Ukraine and Chairperson of the Committee on Ukraine's Integration into the European Union. Tonino Picula, who's an MEP member of the European Parliament for Croatia and a very key personality in all the European Parliament's deliberations on enlargement dossiers. And as we always say, last but not least, Mathieu Bousquet, Director, Enlargement Coordination, Strategy and Investments, Directorate-General for Enlargement and Eastern Neighbourhood at the European Commission. I will invite each speaker to speak for 5 or 7 minutes. I won't really tee up a question per se. I'd like them, first of all, to give some introductory remarks on how they personally see, from their perspective, how the situation is developing, given the constant flux of geopolitics on the world stage. And then we'll have a discussion amongst the panel briefly, and then in short order, open the discussion to all of you in the audience. So far, today it's been very clear that the audience is very keen to be part of an enlarged panel, so I hope this panel will be no exception. So Minister, over to you first. Please give me your assessment of how you think Montenegro's situation is.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here today and discuss about enlargement and the Montenegro situation. And first of all, I would like also to say that yesterday was a huge day if you are speaking about enlargement, not only about if you are speaking about Montenegro, where we succeeded to close one more chapter. It is the 14th out of 33, so I think that we are on a really, really good path. But yesterday we when I say we, I really share the good progress when it comes to advocate the countries. So Ukraine and Moldova opened their three clusters. So I think this is really a good news coming not only from the candidate countries, but from the European Commission and the member states. So when it comes to the position of Montenegro, I think that we finally have the momentum inside our own country. You were speaking about the stalemate when it comes to the process, but that was on the both sides, not only coming from the European Commission, member states, but also coming from the candidate countries. And now we are witnessing that there are a couple more countries that want to join the European Union. And now we are speaking about referendum and Iceland that wanting to join the European Union and organizing referendum in their own country. I think that this is also a great signal if we are speaking about enlargement itself and if we are speaking about about possibility that there are many countries that wants to join the European Union. This is also something that is motivating Montenegro at this moment, even the fact that we are in the final phase when we are only closing the chapters. When I say only closing the chapters, that means that there is a lot of work to be done. And trust me, a communication with European Commission on my left side is not an easy thing, and also with the member states, with a lot of demands, a lot of closing benchmarks, but really great motivation on the both sides, because we are one team, because we want to be aligned, because we want not only to follow common foreign security policy, but we want to follow all the legislation that European Commission is asking as demands to close the chapters and to become the next member of the European Union. So what is happening in Montenegro? A lot of energy, a lot of work, a lot of enthusiasm, and sometimes a lot of fight, and it's normal, it's a democracy. When I say a lot of fight, then you have this FOMO effect. When I say FOMO effect, that means that nobody wants not to be the part of this boat if we are speaking about European integration. And this is good, because we have this kind of competition in the parliament, who is going to vote on more European laws. Then you have this kind of all the time wanting to have everybody involved, even the opposition, even the civil society, and also parliamentary majority, but also the all institutions. So ahead of us, there are 19 more chapters to be closed, really good agenda, dynamic plan that we are fulfilling, and in constant communication with the European Commission, and a lot of challenges. If you are speaking about European integration and all the things that needs and must be done, this is not only the technical process, even the fact that there are a lot of bureaucracy involved and a lot of reporting involved. But this is not a technical question. This means that on the political level, there are a lot of political decisions every day. There are a lot of reforms that are not always the popular one, and you need to explain this to the citizens, you need to explain this to the member states as well, and you need to be the best prepared. So if you're looking through our negotiating positions and what we are doing, I can say that these can go in three directions. One is legislation and voting on the laws, on the strategies, on the implementing and aligning with the EU acquis. And I assure you, by every day, and maybe MP coming from Croatia can share the Croat experience, how it was back then when the Croatia was negotiating. It doubled when it comes to legislation and the number of thousands of the pages that the legislation mustn't be done. But this is only one part of the story. The second one is strengthening our own administration and administrative capacities. 40% of our closing benchmarks are strengthening our own administration and strengthening our own institutions and investing in people. And I think this is the most important thing if we are speaking about accession negotiations. So this is also while we are working and strengthening our own institutions, we are working and strengthening our own people. And this year is also very crucial for us because we are celebrating 20 years since we regained our independence. So it is, well, practically very a young administration, very young institutions, and now it is time now or never to do it by the EU rules. And I think that it is very helpful for us while we are celebrating 20 years that we are already working on the closing of the chapters and strengthening our own position inside the country, but also among the member states. And the third part is also investing in the infrastructure. That means also that tomorrow we are going to be the border of the European Union. That means also that we need to have the strongest border. That means that we need to invest a lot of infrastructure, that we need to invest a lot of when it comes to the environment. And we are mainly focused not only to fulfill the criteria, but to have independent institutions. And we will start by the most important, and we will start and finish and never-ending chapters, 23 and 24, rule of law. By these chapters, we know that these are the biggest test, actually, not only for Montenegro, but for each candidate country, to present ourselves in front of the European Commission and the member states as well. So while we are working and aligning and explaining and fulfilling everything, we pretty much work on the communication with the member states. So we can present our best position where we are, and the best position is if we have the track record. What means to have the track record? It's not the legislation and the laws, there's the implementation. There are fight against organized crime, there's fight against the corruption, and we are delivering. So we have the government who is result-oriented government, the government who so far managed to get not only to get the first CER for the European Commission and any kind of country, but also to so far close 10 chapters, actually 11 with yesterday, so 14 in total. And I think that we showed so far that we have the political will inside our own country to deliver and also to promote ourselves as the next member state. Our main goal, you mentioned, Paul, that there are the reverse membership, that there are many opinions on the table and many chances how we can become the next member state, not only in case of Montenegro, but if we are speaking about the other candidate countries as well. I must tell you that while we are working on all these chapters, it is not an easy task to explain to our citizens what are the benefits when you close chapter 21, for example, yesterday, because those benefits are not easily seen or explained, or those benefits you cannot see the tangible results very soon or to explain to our citizens. But with the growth plan that we have and with joining SEPA, with joining roaming very soon, working on the green lanes or all other kind of these benefits before joining the European Union, I see this also as a good benefit, as a gradual integration before joining the European Union, and also an easy task to explain to our citizens what benefits are for our citizens before becoming the member of the European Union. But our position is very clear when it comes to Montenegro. We don't want to be seen as a package. We don't want to be coupled with any other candidate country, because we see this process as a merit-based process. Even the fact that we are very supportive to all the candidate countries, and this morning I signed also MOU with Ukraine to share our own experience. We already have it with Moldova, and I think this is also a great approach of the communication with other candidate countries, not only with the Western Balkan, where we have really good cooperation and communication when it comes to European integration. But we also want to be a full-fledged member in 28 by 28. This is not only the slogan that we are repeating because it sounds good, even the fact it sounds good, but it's because we know how to deliver. We know what are our obstacles, challenges, and how to resolve them. And we see that Montenegro can also be the bridge between the Western Balkan and the European Union, and I assure you that we will do our best when it comes to our position to fulfill all the criteria and to be very soon among the member states as well.
Thank you, Maida. I mean, a quick question before I move on to Ivanna. Obviously, you're in pole position, as you say, to be the next member state. To what extent, though, have you, as Montenegro, been, and the European Union, been tackling the easier chapters first, and therefore, as you get closer towards the end of the process, the more difficult, maybe not intractable, problematic chapters are still to be resolved, and therefore, do you have any concerns, and that might have an impact on the momentum and the timing of your membership process?
Well, I wouldn't agree that we are now closing the easy chapters. There is no an easy chapter. But we already closed 2 chapters from the fundamentals. Right. One of them was the public procurement last year in June. So that wasn't the easy chapter, believe me. And you all know the legislation and the procedures when it comes to the public procurement in the EU. And also in June, we closed the chapter 32 also from the fundamentals. So we are not making the plan based on the easy or harder to close chapters. We are making the plan, but some of the chapters need and must be closed in December this year, or to be closed list. For example, if you ask me, chapter 22, regional fundings and cohesion fundings, are an easy chapter because you need to have the agency, you need to have the structural, operational structure when it comes to cohesion fundings, but this chapter must be closed in December because of the methodology. So there are some of the chapters that are easiest to close, but by methodology, they must be closed at the very end of the negotiating process. The same thing is when it comes to the budget, chapter 33. So there are a couple of the chapters that must wait for the very end phase of the negotiations. And of course, there are some of the chapters that by the nature are the most demanding ones. The chapter 23, the chapter 24, there are a lot of tasks that we need to fulfill yet. And also chapter 27, 7. So these three very big,
Chapter
very
7 is-
20 chapter environment.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, because I'm all the time on the technical part speaking with European Commission in the numbers.
two know,
So
it's
then
fine.
I think that everybody knows what the numbers are. So sorry for that. But when you are in the chapters and closing benchmarks, I'm still fine. So when it comes to these environment, rule of law chapters, these chapters are the most demanding one. Not only because, and they're also the most demanding to explain to the member states. These are the political questions, not only the legislation. That's why these must be the last one. And also, I think that maybe during the conversation we can speak also a little bit more about the safeguards in the accession treaty. But I think that most demanding chapters and also the most technical by the methodology itself are going to be the last one to be closed in December.
Okay, thank you, Maida.
Thank you.
Over to you, Ivanna. All eyes are on Ukraine, obviously. Give us your current assessment of how you think the discussions are going in terms of your potential future membership and accession of your country to the European Union.
Thank you, Paul. That's, I think, an hour-long conversation in itself, at least. But I appreciate this opportunity to touch base on where we are, but also how do we see from Ukraine what's happening with that normative power of the EU that was suggested as a panel discussion topic for us. Because I think that some 20 years ago, or 24 years ago, when there was this big bang of enlargement, there was a lot of optimism that the very existence of the European Union, it does attract so many other stakeholders and states, and even those ones that are not part of that union would like to be abided by this or those rules and principles that are guiding the European Union. And so that already in itself alone has been changing the environment around it. And that appeal, that attractiveness has been a power in itself and a strength in itself. And that's exactly what was happening. But then we had a set of crises. We had 2008, the financial crisis. We had the 2015 migration crisis. We had 2016, the Brexit. And then on the backdrop, actually, by the way, of the war that was already ongoing since 2014, because I will use every single opportunity to remind everyone that this war that we are fighting right now for survival and that we are finding ourselves in has not started in 2022. It has started 12 years ago, and we are in the 13th year of the war. And that has to be well understood in order to also make the correct assessments and understanding of what's happening. So, and I think that since the start of the full-scale invasion of Russian Federation 4 years ago, we have seen a big shift in a new impulse to that enlargement fatigue that was already accompanying the European Union since probably 2013, after Croatia has managed to join. And that impulse was given not because the EU promptly responded immediately at that point to what was happening in Ukraine, but I think because Ukrainians have decided to stand up for those values that have been guiding the European Union, have been declared, have been kind of worked on, but not necessarily had many countries being ready to stand up to shed blood to protect those values, norms, principles, laws, and so on. So since then, we do still have, we see this impulse, but I'm not sure that it has transferred to a very serious process. With all the achievements that we have had over this period of time, with all the incredible shift of the geopolitical type of decision-making that has been happening on the European Union level, because I think nobody, on the 20th of February of 2022, if we were asked, someone here would be asked, like, do you believe that in 4 months Ukraine will become a candidate member for the EU? Everybody would say, you must be crazy, right? Nobody would believe that. So we have had this new possibilities for Ukraine, the decision on candidacy, the decision on opening the negotiations, and it also opened up the possibilities and the different dynamics for all the Western Balkan countries. I'm sure so. Also opened the doors for Moldova, for that matter, also in Georgia, but Georgia has decided to take another approach to that, unfortunately. And so, but we, at this point, I think we are, with all of us, totally agreeing that we do approach this process as a merit-based process. There's still not enough clarity whether the EU sees this as a technical process or a strategic decision for itself, and whether the concentration on exclusively the letter of each law and principle is something that should be, stronger on this equation, or the spirit of every single approach that has been, driving the EU till now. And I think that there we still have this big question marks that are not clear. So we are grateful for what has been achieved, the exclusive speed of the assessment of the Ukrainian legislation vis-a-vis European acquis, incredible creativity in terms of overcoming basically the veto of Hungary to pass to Ukraine all the negotiating positions of the 26 countries of the EU in terms of all 6 clusters. I think it's incredible. Just yesterday we have received the last 3. And now I think we are getting to this kind of workload that is important to be carried out both on the Ukrainian side but also on the European side. And here we are getting to that point where you hear a lot of announcements. And my question here, maybe to colleagues from the European Commission or to Tonino, what's that buzz with regard to whole discussion about setting the dates? Because we are not asking to take us to the European Union hastily. We do understand that we do have to carry out our part of the job. What we are asking for support, engagement, your human resources, your financial resources to be pulled to that point that we would be successful. We are not asking to change the standards for Ukraine, for example, right? Because we know that Ukraine not being compatible on the standards, being inside the EU, would be a lame duck, and that would be not good for Ukraine and wouldn't be good also would be undermining the whole of the EU. So we do understand that. But at the same time, I think all of us do have to have a clear vision. That's why I was asking also about MFF, about where do we see all of us? Whether we do understand that the geopolitical reality around us does require a speed-up process from both, both within Ukraine, both within Moldova, both within, Montenegro or Albania or anywhere, but also this kind of reform-minded approach from the European Commission. Are we there? Oh, not European Commission exclusively, I mean from the European Union. So are we there yet? That's my question mark.
You talk about the lack of clarity, Ivanna, between the merit-based approach and the more geopolitical strategic approach. Do you think the issue is good?
No, I'm talking about the difference between the technical approach and letter approach and a strategic spirit approach.
Right.
And it's a different thing. I'm not questioning the merit-based approach.
Okay, forgive me then.
Yeah.
But do you still think there's an issue that's maybe seen as a kind of binary choice? You have to go for one rather than the other. The two approaches can't sort of coexist?
No, I do believe they could coexist, but still you have to define, what's the major framework in which you are working.
Right.
So you are working on merit-based, but you do understand, okay, but we have to deliver the result. All right, or we are looking all the pretexts how to not to deliver the result, because there are so many different conditionalities which other countries have been carrying out, ideally or not ideally on different stages. Those who were joining and so on. So this I don't see as an issue that has been resolved up till now.
Well, we'll come to that. You raise a very important point, Ivanna, that hopefully we can explore in the discussion between the panel and then the audience in a few minutes. Tonino, over to you, my friend. You, I said earlier in the introduction, you are a key player in the broader enlargement discussions inside the European Parliament, specifically, I think, in relation to Serbia. I mean, how do you see the role of the European Parliament in the enlargement process in the future as an accelerator, as a kind of safeguard in case some of the politics gets carried away?
First of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's good to be here in such a distinguished company of the colleagues here. And of course, I think it would be polite to congratulate the Center for European Reform's 28th birthday, if I'm informed correctly. So, happy birthday, and 28 years ago, it was, I think, in Europe, 1998. And if you're talking about European Union, it's good to count the number of the member states. It was 15 member states back then, freshly enlarged with Austria, Finland, and Sweden. Yeah. And another crucial process took place in that period of time. It was, of course, Big Bang enlargement, which took place in 2004, in a way. We tend to forget that in 28 years ago, it was two groups of the candidate countries, so-called Helsinki and I think Luxembourg group. So when I'm talking about this not so ancient history, I would like to underline that enlargement process is, of course, one of the most important European politics. It's for sure not a virgin territory. If you check from inside, from perspective of candidate country, it seems that it's a pretty rigid and stable process that you need to overcome a number of hurdles, that you need to swallow and consume and adopt a huge number of different regulations, generally known as the acquis communautaire. It's a common legal heritage of the European Union. I remember when we talk about our accession to European Union, it's been, when talk about volume, somehow 50 to 60,000 pages. Now, we are talking right now, and before this panel, it's, they say, almost 100,000 pages. More. It's even more. Yeah. So it expands even now, what we are talking about. So one of my first conclusion when I was a practitioner in my country, of course, and I was took part in this process, talking to Brussels, of course. And it seems to me today that it was, in a way, much easier to found European Economic Community back then in the mid-50s of the last century, than become a member of European Union in the third decade of the 21st century. It's immense task now, not because of the enlarged acquis communautaire. I think it's something else thing. Now European Union is one very experienced aggregation of the countries after being enlarged, I think, 8 times so far. And there is a lot of conceptions how to proceed, not with enlargement, but with the European Union. If we concentrated only our debate on the enlargement as such, we are risking to lose a more general picture, what is the future of the European Union right now. And when we start to talk today, one song falls on my mind. It's With or Without You, of U2. What I mean with or without you. With or without internal reforms before or in parallel before we would be enlarged next time, maybe even 28. I would like to see Montenegro in the European Union as a 28th country. So it's a big dilemma, and we are waging discussions in the European Parliament how to proceed. Is it important to prepare European Union for the next comers properly, or we need to insist to follow current rules and negotiate it with the candidate countries and let them in, thinking about, of course, consequences, but not put another hurdle before the candidate countries. It's absolutely tough debate, And to illustrate how tough it is, I got before my eyes a memo, a piece of paper of European Parliament, and you can find it our slogan of the European Parliament, and it's united in differences. Yes, but how many differences can swallow association, sui generis, multilateral organization, set of 27 different national states? And it's the question of the day. And along the process now we are assessing what does it really mean for the European Union to enlarge in the next wave right now. You mentioned one important guy, it's Jean-Claude Juncker. He's one of the founding fathers of the current system running the European Union. He was one of the main drivers of the system. And I remember almost 10 years ago, we were in Strasbourg in a plenary session, and Mr. Juncker tried to describe, you said he promised us, at the beginning of his term, there would be no enlargement. But what Mr. Juncker, I appreciate him very much, he's an excellent guy, but he forgot to tell us that before enlargement of the European Union, something else would happen, and that is a squeezing of the European Union. 2 years after Juncker addresses us, United Kingdom left the European Union. But then, of course, he tried to portray future of the European Union. And he said there is a possible 5 scenarios for the Union in the next 10 years, in a way. He said first scenario would be status quo, that in one point we have to admit that we are not able to deeply reform European Union and must be happy with the current state of play and carry on. Second scenario Juncker envisaged is economic union. So he said we need to admit that European Union is an excellent economic aggregation, that we are absolutely able to trade within and with the rest of the world, but political superstructure of the European Union is questionable. From my point of view, it was some kind of the dream of the British Conservatives. They would like also to treat European Union as an endless area where they can sell goods, services, whatever. So, the third and most realistic scenario is a multi-speed Europe. So, of course, we need to stay together, but we need to admit that there are a lot of differences among us. We are not capable to consume some mechanisms and chances together at once, like introducing a euro, like joining the Schengen area. So it's most realistic that Europe will progress, but in unequal pace, in a way. Fourth scenarios for Mr. Juncker was, let's do more, but with the less regulations. Or we need to reduce the number of the issues we can deal with, because there is a lot of different interests, diverging interests, confronting interests. But problem is how to reduce European Union competences after being in place for 70 years. In a way. We are talking about more, not less. And fifth and final scenario proposed by Mr. Juncker was federal Europe. So ever-closing Europe, Europe which will increase its competences within, of course, be more federal structured, in a way, talking more and more with one language, let's say, abolishing unanimity in a number of the cases, of course, being more functional. But I think that it's unrealistic as a first scenario, status quo. It's impossible for European Union to be freezed in time, because we are now faced with the imminent threats and, I would say, chances. But in this moment, I don't think that we can talk about some kind of the federalistic structure of the European Union. And finally, about Croatia, it's my message to my colleagues from Montenegro and Ukraine, of course. It's possible to see Montenegro and Ukraine in the European Union, like we did 23 years ago. Don't forget, among 10 countries which joined the European Union back then, it was one Malta and one Poland, one big European country and one small European country, 40 million people and 60,000 people. Now it's very hard to talk about the dates. I think it's very important to prepare candidate countries properly to join European Union. But of course, we must not shy away from debates in the Council and how to prepare European Union for the next comers any year soon. And I do believe that process will be dynamized, because now we got Iceland back on the table. And I think it will be some kind of collateral after, I do believe, people from Iceland vote for renegotiated European Union, and it would be some kind of impetus for the rest of the 10 countries in a row to do their best to accommodate requirements and to give us, promoters of the enlargement, enough so-called ammunition to advocate their cases.
Thank you, Tonino. I think thanks to you, it's the first time I've heard YouTube being mentioned at a CER event. That's quite a first. But more seriously, you referred to these 100,000 pages of papers to go through and chapters. I mean, quite directly, I mean, we'll talk to Mathieu in a second about the actual process, because he does all the heavy lifting inside the European Commission. But from the European Parliament perspective, Tonino, is there any role you can collectively play in trying to simplify the process, or are you going to, the danger often with European parliamentarians is to maybe add to the paperwork, frankly, or not?
Yeah, of course, it's always a debate. Are we able to make it simpler, or to be, let's say, a bandwagon, of course, waiting for another to do important job and then we just to join. Don't forget that we are last in the line. Each and every accession treaty must be ratified, not only in 27 countries, but in the European Parliament. But what we would like, and it's an ongoing debate, we would like to be in position to scrutinize what other institutions are doing, in Commission, Council, of course. We would like to be a filter of certain proposals. And of course, that's the paradox of the European Parliament. We are not legislator like a national parliaments.
Yeah.
We are sharing that role with the Council and Commission. It's institutions which deliver proposals. And it's up to us and the Council to talk about proposals, very often in trialogue form. But of course, now treaty which is in force, it's a Lisbon Treaty, starting from 2009. And Lisbon Treaty already had given European Parliament 96 new competencies.
Right.
Of course, we can ask for more, but in this moment, I don't want to sell illusions that it's possible to achieve.
All right. Thank you very much, Nino. So over to you, Mathieu. You've heard many comments about how the process is working. Maybe in your opening remarks, maybe give us a flavor, if you wouldn't mind, about how the working methods and the methodology, if you like, of the European Commission and your DG in particular has evolved over time as surely your workload has increased and increased.
Yeah, thank you.
Are we on?
Thank you. Does it work? Yeah? Okay, better. No, thank you. Thank you first for inviting me, and thank you, and happy birthday indeed. I mean, happy anniversary to see you. So, I mean, maybe before we go there, I just wanted to talk about the title, I mean, the normative power. Because I think to me this is very important, and Mrs. Klympush, I mean, just mentioned that. I mean, EU is a community of values. Ukrainians have been fighting for it. So this is very clear. And this is something we should not forget. In terms of projecting democracy, rule of law, our standards outside, I think this is something that the EU is key for and projects this dimension. So the attractiveness about the European Union is also about it. And I think the Union works more with attraction rather than by coercion, as some other countries do. So by helping the countries to shape institutions, governance, and standards, I mean, this is really a way we've been doing that internally, and we project that, and it's attractive with our values for external partners. Also because I think history shows that enlargement is transformative. I mean, the societies, after joining the EU, whether it was Spain or Portugal or Croatia, have also transformed by being member of the Union. So this is something which is something that our colleagues from Montenegro or Ukraine, also want to invest in. So if we want, the enlargement process to remain transformative and also to remain credible, it's very important that it remains merit-based, as Mrs. Klympush said, or as Minister just said before. So it's merit-based, meaning that it's not only about, the 100,000 pages of the acquis, but it's about the reform that underpin it. Because it's not only about adopting the legislation, as you just say, it's about getting the institutions, getting the skills, getting the capacity to implement this acquis, getting also this capacity to work in the single market and in the European Union. So this is something that, is really at the core of the process, and we were discussing with member states. We don't have representative from member states, which is also another element of the council in the picture. It's something that matters very much to them, this capacity really to implement the reforms in a sustainable way. And we've seen in the past also, in some cases, some backsliding. So as we are talking about Europe and Europe at 27, which is a little bit different at Euro at 6 or at 9 or 12 or 15, there is also a question about whether the reforms in the recently joining countries are sustainable enough, to maintain this momentum and also this loyalty to the European Union. So we've seen that. So there is a kind of fear from some citizens and from member states, and therefore securing these reforms is absolutely key. So as you said, Minister, it's not only about closing all the negotiations chapters, but it's also creating, the reforms that will be long-lasting and allow the country to really benefit from being in the EU. So in terms of process, I think, as you mentioned, some of you, taking from different parts, we've been moving from a period where nothing was moving into a period recently where everything is moving and is moving very fast. We closed more chapters with Montenegro in 15 months than in 12 years. And when we are saying closing a chapter, it's just not having a meeting, you and us, where we are just saying, okay, fine, this is done. This is really about a thorough assessment about whether the legislation has been adapted and the capacity of Montenegro or another country either to really implement these reforms, and this is also transformative for the citizens. So it's about certainly closing chapters, a lot of progress with Montenegro, you mentioned that. We have opened all the chapters with Albania, and now, we are moving with Ukraine and Moldova to prepare and to really identify what are the benchmarks. This is something that was also introduced with a new methodology, is really to be clear on what we expect. The idea is not to have shifting goalposts, but to be clear, this is what we expect, and we have closing benchmarks for the different chapters, which in a way is due in terms of if we want to have a real partnership with a country before in this negotiation process. We need to be clear about what we expect. And then we, the Commission, are working with the partner country, to assess whether these reforms are implemented or not. So what we can clearly see, and this was very clear in the Commission report in November, the enlargement package, is that we see progress like never. We see clearly 4 front runners. We name them. Ukraine, Moldova, Montenegro, and Albania, who really made a choice to move forward and who are moving forward. We have not set dates, but we recognize that the partner countries themselves have set dates, Montenegro being the first one. And we also said in the report very clearly, if the reforms continue at the pace they are continuing and they are developing, there's realistic prospect that we will close the negotiation and move to the next step of the accession process. So I think this is important because, contrary to some perception that were maybe in the last decade, there is a clear feeling that when the partner country does reform, I mean, we are there to support and to react as well. So that's something I just wanted to mention. It's not that we are reactive and getting some goalposts being shifted. I mean, we are delivering also when the partner countries do deliver with these different processes. But an element is time, because it takes time. It takes time for all these reforms. I mean, Montenegro has many chapters to close before the end of the year. And we are confident that you can do it, but you need really to work on all of them at the same time. So this is very much time-consuming. Then there is some sequencing for other countries about the reforms. And the challenge is, of course, both for the government, but for the citizens. Where do they see the results of that? You mentioned that you need transpartisan support. It's a societal approach, I mean, enlargement. It's not about a party who is going to lead on that. I mean, you need really to have the full society on board, which you have clearly in Montenegro now at the moment. But we need also to show to citizens that there are some actions that can deliver for them. And this is a concept of gradual integration. This gradual integration, which was already, I mean, in the DCFT, I mean, that was negotiated with Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, and that was basically also leading to the situation in Ukraine and to Maidan revolution. So this is a good example of how reforms, when they are implemented, can make a change. CEPA, I mean, this transfer of money on the European, on the euro. This is something that is being made possible because there were reforms on anti-money laundering, because there were reforms on counter-terrorism, on financial management, and so on the banking sector, and so on. We've been discussing about these reforms. They were not always taking place. And then, I mean, when we propose also an end goal, I mean, with joining CEPA, I think it was also a trigger for moving a little bit quicker. And this has a big benefit for citizens. I mean, just for the Western Balkans, 500 million euros are being saved every year by this reduced transaction costs, which are not only reduced in terms of timing, but which are at speed because they are much more quick. So that's making a difference. That's about integration. Roaming like at home, it's the same. So, but there are reforms which are needed to do that. So this is the full concept of gradual integration. So the way we see gradual integration is still on the way to enlargement, but it's also to showcase the benefits of some reforms on the way to accession for the citizens and the businesses, to see that all the efforts that the government and the society is making are not vain, but are also delivering in concrete terms. So that's also about the normative power of the EU and the enlargement process. So, yeah, I stop here. And
you raised an interesting point for people like me who don't follow the detail, as we've established, Maida, on some of these chapters. Am I right in saying, though, so what you were talking broadly about reforms, but on specifics like transfer of money and Rome, was it Rome like at home and all those? They are benefits that citizens of these applicant candidate countries can see before a formal membership process decision is taken. Am I correct in saying that? In other words, so the publics in your country can see benefits even though we're some way ahead in some cases of a final decision on membership.
We are already part of the Rome.
Yeah,
like
right,
at home.
okay.
With Ukraine.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ukraine and Moldova are already part of it because of the DCFTA that was foreseeing that, and because of the effort they made in terms of regulation. So now we are working with the Western Balkans. A lot is taking place, but we need still some legal background, I mean, to do it. And the Rome like at home is basically that you are calling a European country and you pay the same price as if you were calling your own country. Yeah. I mean, for those of us who have traveled in these countries before, they were Rome like at home. I mean, it's a lot of savings, it's simplifying business, it's simplifying contacts between people, and we know that people-to-people contacts are key.
Yeah.
The more we are going to get these people-to-people contacts, the easier the acceptability of the accession process also will be for the European citizens, the EU citizens. So that's also something that needs not to be underestimated. There is a lot of work that we are doing, with the partner country, on preparing them, but there is also some work that needs to be done, within the member states, with the population, with the parliament, because at the end of the day, the treaty has also to be ratified by the different member states and by the European Parliament. We have strong advocates in the European Parliament, but in some member states, we also need, to convince the people that it is in their interest, of having an enlarged European Union.
Yeah.
Paul, if I can just add,
please.
when it comes to this topic, this is why this instrument growth plan for the Western Balkans is very important. SEPA, roaming, green lanes, all these initiatives are important, but they're not only to fulfill small criteria. In 4 areas, we needed to have the reform agenda with 130 reforms that must be done. So every 6 months, you have the reporting that you're sending to European Commission. Based on that, you have, it's always some money involved, but also these kind of the projects we have, it is also something that is helping us on the accession negotiations as well. So it goes in parallel, even the fact that there are, there are some similarities, but these are 2 different processes that goes hand in hand. And I assure you, all these reforms that Mathieu mentioned, those are not the easy ones. I guess that we can finish when it comes to the roaming by June. So that can be one of the huge topics when Montenegro is hosting next EU Western Balkan Summit, 5th of June in Montenegro. So I think that when it comes to our side, and also Moldova and Ukraine and Albania and all the kind of countries, you see a lot of motivation. And finally, that we are not on the same position like a couple years ago. So the things are changing, whether they are on the gradual integration, whether they are on the closing of the chapters, whether they are on the political discussion about the enlargement. So I think this is very important for us now.
It's true. We tend to think of enlargement as very much an elite process, and we tend maybe to downgrade the importance of public opinion. Maybe we can finish discussion before the end of our panel. I'd like to open this now to the audience, so please get ready with any questions or comments you have, and in the time-honored fashion, give your name and your organization, and I'd like you to stand up as well. It's even easier. I know who you are, but tell everybody else who you are.
Thank you. Gorčević, CER. So my question is to all the panelists. What do you see as realistic to achieve in the next 1 or 2 years? And I'm asking that because we, as you have said, there is progress by EU institutions. There's a lot of progress on the candidate side, but some member states are still quite critical, let's just say that. And we also know that elections are coming next year in France, in Italy, in Poland.
Yeah.
So it's easy to imagine that the environment will be less welcoming. So what is your realistic scenario, not your best scenario?
Well, I don't have the other scenario, but the best scenario, just to tell you that.
Ivanna, would you like to go first? Your prognostic for the next 2 years. 2 years, you said?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's critical for all of us during 1 year to come up with the very clear security equation for the European Union, for the European continent. And I think that in the geopolitics, the current situation, the maybe even strategic ambiguity and the shake-up tells that there is no place for European security and defense without Ukraine. And there is no Ukrainian security and defense without European one. So therefore, I think that one of the things that have to be achieved in one way or another, a setting through which we will understand how they are not only theoretically intertwined, but what are the whole practical responses to this challenge. I think that's first thing. And I think that that's realistic, because I think that even though we do not have the common denominator in terms of threat perception, unfortunately, still in Europe, we can talk about the differences between North and northern eastern countries and southern western countries of the European Union and so on. But I think that there is much more growing understanding that of the commonality of the threat and the need to act together as a stronger force in this respect. With regard to the enlargement, we have different approaches back home in terms of what we can deliver upon as a country. I do belong to those, I think, realists who do not believe that by the end of 2026 we will be able to fulfill all the conditionalities for the EU membership. So, and I think that we won't be able to do that even by the end of the 2027. However, I think that we should be using at this particular moment the goodwill, again, the resources, including human resources that are being allocated by the Commission, by the member states, standing ready to get engaged with Ukraine on our transformation path, as much as we can on the very, very difficult backdrop of fighting a bloody war of survival. And just maybe one more word which doesn't correspond to what we are discussing now. On the first panel, I was listening to this electrification ideas and the necessity, and I totally do understand everything that is happening. And then I'm thinking, okay, and in order to have that electricity right now at home, what we are doing, we are backing up every single big facility with a generator, which is fuel-based. And so for us, but that explains you the task that is ahead of us in terms of European integration. So when we are saying that, well, maybe do not lower the standards towards us, but do understand that we are a country in a very complex and a very different situation in comparison to everyone else. So because as opposed to, going to this electrification as everybody else would right now do it. So we are going through another totally different process when Russia is trying to bring us back to the Stone Age. And after that, we are again getting to the new stages through a very difficult experience. So that's why I think it's sometimes incomparable to what is possible in one part of aspiring countries and in another one.
Thank you, Tonino.
Yeah. The lack of vision leads to lack of hope. And I would like to believe that the European Union is still able to build up and to create a vision how it will look like before the end of the current mandate of the Commission and the Parliament, in a way. And I think enlargement is one of the paths we need to go through. Because when we talk about enlargement, it's always some kind of accompanied with internal reform. It's not impossible to imagine enlargement without some kind of embedded process before enlargement itself. So I believe that it's a very tricky and it can be counterproductive to confront necessity of internal reforms of European Union and enlargement as one of the most successful European Union politics ever. But hope cannot be political program. We need to develop it. We need to agree what does it really mean. And for me, as a political practitioner, I'm professor of sociology. I try to ask sociologists in myself before I reply as a politician. But according to my own experience, now I'm almost 13 years in European Parliament, and when you talk about European Union, no matter how we admire European Union for all kinds of achievement and benefits for the citizens for decades, the truth about future of European Union lies in the national member states, because it's most influential moment for European Union future is what's going on the national elections. Then European Parliament elections every 5 years. And from this moment on, next couple of years, we will see possible very interesting reaction of European electorate in their own countries. You mentioned France. Don't forget that we are waiting eagerly a result of the Hungarian elections next month, which would be very decisive in so many areas. We're talking about how to unblock 90 million euro, billion, I don't want to cheat. Billions for Ukraine. Again, we need to be very innovative in order to, let's say, avoid hurdles imposed by one member state, in a way. So, for me now, it's a very much in focus how to communicate with the citizens of the European Union and present them benefits of being together since mid-50s of the last centuries. And I'm still sorry for UK left the European Union. It was a colossal mistake. Of course, let me say that, because I believe still that European Union would be much stronger, much more influential with the UK than without the UK. Right. I believe so.
We all agree.
Yeah. So the worst case scenario is always possible. Do you know, one German professor counted that when UK left the European Union, it was like 14 economies less developed of the member states at once left the European Union. 14. I don't think that it brought pleasure and happiness to UK, but of course we felt it very much. So how to prevent, first of all, worst case scenario? I don't believe that anyone would like to leave European Union. Even ill-minded people who hate European Union alter their strategy after Brexit. They don't want to talk about leaving European Union, Hungary or whatsoever, but they took a different course of action. Now they want to become, influential and king players within the institutions. And unfortunately, after the last European Parliament elections, 2024, they did a good job. And we feel it in the European Parliament.
Thank you, Tony. Before I ask Maida and Mathieu to respond to your question, a quick, we're talking about public opinion and support for enlargement as much as for European Union. I got some figures here. 2025 Eurobarometer, 56% of Europeans believe their country would benefit from future enlargement. Support is highest in countries such as Sweden, Denmark, Lithuania, Finland and Poland, where it averages around 74%. However, by contrast, France, Czechia, Austria and Germany record low levels of around 45%. So there is an issue there. Very briefly, you want to respond to the question?
Yes.
And then you, Mathieu.
Yes, let's really be realistic now. If we are looking through the perspective of Montenegro, we know that we are going to deliver the closing of the chapters by the end of this year. So what it's in our hands, we are going to deliver and to do. So we can plan that we are going to fulfill what is on our side. But when it comes to the side of member states and the ratification in the parliaments of the member states, then you don't know what to expect. You don't know what, and this year is the year where we saw a lot of uncertainties that are happening, not a lot of things that you couldn't predict, and a lot of things that are geopolitically, not only that are inside European Union, but geopolitically looking, there are a lot of things that are happening and you cannot stop them. Well, not at this moment, but you cannot predict them and you don't know how to see how to resolve all of these issues. What is the best scenario for Montenegro? Because we only have plan A. We are not looking into plan B, C, or any other. Because if you're looking, and this knows perfectly that if you're looking in some other scenarios, then like the Prime Minister said, our Prime Minister from Montenegro said, then you don't trust in the scenario A. And for us, this is joining the European Union is that we are going to do whatever is needed on the technical and also when it comes to political level, because we know that we already see ourselves as we share European values, and we will do everything when it comes to negotiations. But what to expect from the member states, it's not only about the elections and their domestic political situation. I think that there are going to happen a lot of things in the future, and we need to take care of each of the member states itself. And it is also connected with Eurobarometer, what were their main concerns not only the rule of law, migration. There were a lot of things that agriculture involved. There were a lot of topics why the member states are not so welcome when it comes to the enlargement. And I think that we need to address each of these topics inside the member states and have the open debates on each candidate country itself. And this is the best approach then why we can show ourselves to the member states. So realistically, yes, we will deliver the closing of the chapters, and we hope that the member states will have the EU agenda and enlargement among the highest priorities, so we can have the successful story on this.
Okay. Mathieu.
Thank you. No, I think, I mean, the Council and Parliament are very clear, I mean, to respond to the partner countries. I mean, the enlargement, I mean, is the best geopolitical investment in terms of prosperity, stability, and security. This is in all the conclusions of the Council. This is also in the conclusion of some reports of the Parliament. Now, the question is when you are going to the individual member states and to the population. What the Eurobarometer says, and I just want to add one country because it look the way you portrayed it, Paul, is that it's Northeast Europe which is in favor, while the South is not. Where Spain is very much in favor. Yeah. So it's not about whether you're close to the East or to the Western Balkans that you are either in favor or against. I mean, there are more profound questions related to it. But an interesting point in this Eurobarometer is that when we ask the people whether they are well informed or not about enlargement, the people that are well informed, I mean, value very much the enlargement. So there is also a question of information sharing, and Tonino Picula mentioned that. It's also about the member states and the governments and the citizens, I mean, to talk about what enlargement means. I very much welcome, I know that Montenegro, Albania, Ukraine and Moldova are also going in the member states to explain who they are. I mean, it's about, I mean, the same community of people. So, but if the people and the countries are not known, there is a resistance to it. So I think it's very important that we are investing, not the Brussels bubble, but I mean, really, I mean, the governments, I mean, together with the partner country governments, I mean, to talk about the value added of it. I'm French, I mean, a big change, I mean, for the Euro referendum was very much about when the private sector engaged. I know there are many private sector colleagues in the room. That made a difference. When at the time, I mean, the DG of Danone says we need a Euro and we need to go enlargement, I mean, that made a difference for the population. So the business opportunities, the fact that we are working, I mean, on the same single market and so on, I mean, is also, we need also to see the positive about the enlargement and not to talk about the possible challenge. Second point, I think we will get a new generation of treaty with safeguards. This is something we are going to work with. And we will also get an MFF. I mean, that's a previous discussion, but this is also important also, I mean, having a financial package for Montenegro and for the other, I mean, next year, I mean, to see how and to make this real as a perspective of Montenegro and the others joining. And of course, I mean, the Commission will be there to support financially and technically the partner countries, I mean, to implement all the closing of the chapters. I mean, the closing of the chapters, and I think this is also an important message I want to pass, is not about, I mean, an academic work. It's also about, as I said, reforms, but it's also a way to communicate, and we need to use that. You need to use that, not only us, but you need to use that to communicate to the citizens of the old member states that basically the reforms are there, and their fear about differences in treatment between EU and the new member states are basically covered because of this complex methodology, certainly complex, but because, I mean, all the safeguards are there. So when we are talking about agriculture, I mean, health, education, and so on, I mean, this is only the chapters, and by closing the chapters, we are saying collectively, with the blessing of the member states, that basically the future member state is ready to join. And is at a level of standards, it's about our normative power, at a level of standard which is acceptable for the Union. So the European citizen should not feel that. On the contrary, it should see that as a projection of what happens in the EU. This is a change in the way we communicate about the value-added enlargement for the European citizen. But of course, there are national politics in play.
Thank you, Mathieu. It's time for another question from the audience. Who would like to ask a question? You, sir. Stand, please, John, and repeat your name.
Yes, John Peet from The Economist. The biggest country ever to apply to join the European Union opened negotiations to do so in 2004. Of course, those negotiations are now frozen. I wonder, really, I think my question is for Mathieu. Is it time for the European Union just to say, sorry, Turkey is never going to join?
Mathieu, just for you.
This would be certainly not for me to say and to respond to this question. What is clear, and you can read in the enlargement package that we had, on the specifics of the big country you are mentioning, and also given the focus on the EU being a community of values, I think, and the question of rule of law, human rights, judiciary, everything which is in chapter 23 and chapter 24, for those who don't know what is in chapter 23 and 24, which are the so-called fundamentals, the situation, does not allow to move forward. That's very clear, and that's in the report. However, what Commissioner Kroes and the President also communicated very clearly, in this geostrategic world, and in these times, even more now, given the war in the Middle East, having a strategic partnership with this country is important. So we need to rethink the way we are approaching this country. For the moment, clearly not on the enlargement track. Also, we are still publishing every year a report on Turkey. But to see what is the kind of partnerships that we can benefit. All the Black Sea strategies, the connectivity agenda, is with Turkey. The new possibilities of having a peace in South Caucasus, with Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, the road to Central Asia, now that the road north is closed, the road south is also at stake now, through the Gulf countries. The strategic value of this partnership, is undeniable. So we need to think about that.
Thank you, Mathieu. There's a question here. The microphone. Who has the microphone? Somebody. First of all, Anton, and then Sandra. Ladies first. Sorry, it's very rude of me, Sandra. Stand up and tell us who you are, Sandra.
Yeah, sure. My name's Sandra Kaduri. I'm a communications advisor. My question's actually back to communications. Have we learned enough in the last 10 years how to communicate against populism, disinformation, interference? Because clearly, if we can't win some policy arguments about immigration, it's going to be much harder for enlargement to take place and create the consensus for that. Do we feel, are we getting the hang of, are we getting back to sort of fact-based constructive discourse, or are we still a long way from learning how to communicate today?
Thank you, Sandra. Who'd like to go first on that one?
Maybe
Ivanna, then Maida. Okay.
First, the brief answer to your question is no, we haven't learned enough, I think. The longer answer, I think, does correspond to the things that we have to define, the things that we are dealing with for what they really are. And when we are still continuing discussion, how do we address, for example, hybrid threats, among which there is an information hybrid operation or whatever. Let's accept that this are not a hybrid. This are just a different type of attacks that are attacking our societies, our countries, our way of life, our beliefs, our values, and let us find the not soft instruments to deal with those threats while defining them differently and defining them as attacks. But let's engage, which is very difficult with the whole layers of safeguards. but also involving law enforcement, as it was, for example, Moldovan elections. I think they are the best telling example, or for example, the Romanian elections, right? Presidential elections. I think when you have seen the combination of actually communicative response, but also with using of legal law enforcement instruments in order to counter those attacks, then it has a different effect. That's one thing. Also, but with regard to communications, also on the positive side, I think we are also still lacking readiness and leadership across the European continent in terms of politicians being ready to lead as opposed to being ready to respond to what their voters supposedly want to see. And there, maybe some of the examples is when the kind of center-right parties trying to ensure, when they think that they are trying to ensure that maybe the far-right parties would not hijack their reasonable agenda, are trying to play along with some of the far-right communication. And then we are actually, as opposed to seeing how the far-right getting closer to the center, we are seeing the centrists getting, in their approach to another part of the equation. And that is a mistake. So that's why I'm saying that we haven't learned that. So it does take courage. It does take to go against the wave of expectation of the people, but that's not what everybody is ready to do still.
Thank you.
No.
Maida, you want to come in?
I would agree with Ivanna totally, especially when it comes to the communication. The Stratcom, FIMI, all kind of disinformation, false information there when it comes to the social media. And yes, Moldova is one of the best experiences from the couple months ago, so where we should learn more. What will happen in Montenegro, it's already started, and of course, anti-EU campaign is never too obvious. And when you are in the final phase, also elections in Montenegro are going to be in next year, June 2027. So the electoral campaign and anti-EU campaign is going to happen this year and the next year. So everything that is happening, especially, for example, if you're closing the chapters in the media, you will have one small title and also some against anti-EU narrative that are going to be the more vocal and the more visible one. So what we need to learn as a candidate countries, but also European Commission and the member states as well, is also to have Stratcom more visible and also to communicate even more. It is going to be super hard. And this is not only the scenario of Montenegro this year, this was happening also in Croatia before joining the European Union. This was happening in Bulgaria, in Romania before joining the European Union. So this is the scenario that is repeating whenever you are closer to join the EU. So this scenario is also somewhere where not only the candidate countries can answer itself. We need allies on this, and especially if we saw what was happening in Moldova with different tools that we don't have in Montenegro at all, I think that FIMI is going to be one of the challenges this year for Montenegro as well.
Thank you, very short. Thank you for raising that issue. I think we are risking to lose one battle after another when talking about our communication strategy. We were aware of the situation even 6-7 years ago, before the European Parliament election held in 2019, because it's a result of the survey that almost 70% of asked citizens, they were afraid that their political decision has been contaminated with the misinformation. I'm talking about 2018, 2019. Now, situation is much worse. We are talking about drone warfare, which is cheap, but we talk about misinformation and disinformation and interference in meddling in democratic processes, which are also very much cheap. If you land in Belgrade, for example, or move around, you can see billboards. Thank you, Comrade Xi. Like China is financing the Serbia economic efforts and transformation. We know that it's not true. But we are losing a battle. We are losing a battle. 66% of Serbian economy relies on the European Union, exchange with the European Union. But what we are doing to improve situation? Very few attempts, so that was our attempt to convince Commission, but the Council, in a couple of the trilogues about the financing instrument for the Western Balkans, IPA-free instrument for pre-accession, and the growth plan, to form a finance line only for promoting European Union, what we are doing there, not to imagine things or fantasize, but just to present to the citizens of the Western Balkans countries what European Union really means for their daily lives. I think we must be more active in that case.
Thank you. I think we only have time for one more question. Anton, I promised you. Stand up, Anton, maybe it's easier.
Anton Spisak from the Center for European Reform. My question is about the single market and enlargement. And I find it really striking that in the political narrative of President von der Leyen, she will talk about the need for diversification and economic resilience and greater industrialization, and she will point to all the trading partners around the world, but she will rarely talk about the European neighborhood in this context. And I'm just really curious, Mathieu, that's a question probably for you, for how do you see the single market as a tool for geopolitical leverage, but also geo-economic tool in this current world that we are now in? And how does it feed into this enlargement process? Is it part of the gradual integration equation that you've outlined? And is the European Commission sort of missing the trick at the moment by not trying to leverage the single market more explicitly in this context?
It's a question to Mathieu in particular. Mathieu.
Maybe because it is self-evident, I would say. So basically, I mean, a lot of what we are proposing under the gradual integration, I mean, is to use, I mean, the power of the single market. I mean, when we talked about Home Like at Home, I mean, the ACAs that we have been negotiating, I mean, some elements, I mean, on the digital wallet, on the green lanes, on whatever. I mean, this is all about, I mean, the single market and the power it offers also to be transformative. I think this is basically the key of the gradual integration. I mean, there are some questions to which extent we can go under gradual integration, given, I mean, that we are talking about extending that outside the jurisdiction of the European Union. I'm sorry to be technical, but this is a key issue, and this is why we need to negotiate either a DCFTA for Rome Like at Home or specific agreements for Rome Like at Home with the Balkans. Because, I mean, you need also to have the legal certainty to work. This is the way we work. This is the way we operate within the EU. If we want to use this, I mean, outside the EU, we need also to work on this aspect. So, maybe to respond to your first questions, I think it's self-evident that, I mean, enlargement is about using the power of the single market also to attract. It's part of it. As I said, it's community of values, it's community of principles, it's a single market. There are principles the way we work and we trade and we do business. And this is also what attracts, I mean, our partner countries. But I will leave it to our colleagues from Montenegro and Ukraine to speak about it.
Thank you. At least one of my panelists has to catch a flight very soon. But I will like to finish off by asking each of you very briefly. It's a very big question, maybe a brief answer. As you know, there's a big debate at the moment about Europe writ large, not just the European Union, but candidate countries, other third countries on the European continent. To what extent are we over-optimistic about our role in society, not so much internally, but also projecting our values and our strength and our resilience to the outside world? Are we delusional? Is this a moment where we can rise to the challenge? Those kind of things. These are, and there are many more options in between those I haven't mentioned. So very briefly, one of you, each of you in turn, please. Basically, to what extent are you optimistic about this as a moment when Europe, deliberately I say Europe, can rise to the challenge it faces? Starting with you, Tonino.
There's two moments in the recent European Union, if you say history, and two important moments. One is the Vladimir Putin moment. Why I'm telling that? Because Vladimir Putin moment brought Sweden and Finland into the NATO. Sweden got 200 years old tradition of neutrality in international affairs. And all of a sudden, together with Finland, they decided to join the NATO. I believe in Donald Trump moment. After 13 years, Iceland decided to go back to the negotiation table, and I believe that process will be successful, not only for the Iceland, but at least Montenegro and some other countries joining the European Union.
Thank you very much, Tina. Ivan, over to you.
I really do believe in the European Union. I think it did get its act together after 2022. I'd prefer it did it earlier, since 2014, then maybe we wouldn't be there where we are today. Nevertheless, I think that at this point, it's critical whether the European Union that has been successful in projecting its normative power is ready to create enough efficient instruments to defend that attractiveness. And so this defense and security will actually define whether the European Union will remain such an appealing magnet, but also a geopolitical player.
Thank you, Ivana. Maida.
Well, European Union, it is still a place to join and a place to be for a lot of kind of countries. I think that this is obvious, and let's finish this panel in this in optimism by also motivating maybe beside Iceland one more.
Right. And Mathieu, final word.
Yeah, thank you. I don't like that we're speaking about the 100,000 pages because it looks like a repoussoir. I mean, basically something that nobody wants to look at. What I'm impressed by is that certainly, I mean, the demand that we're having in terms of all the chapters, but I'm impressed by the commitment of the partner countries to deliver. And recently, certainly, I mean, there has been a big change. So I want to be optimistic and think that they are going to continue on this wave. And the two panelists, I mean, in addition to Tonino, were very clear that they are committed to bring these countries, I mean, closer and within the European Union at the point of time. So I'm very optimistic.
Thank you, Mathieu. There's now a coffee break. Before that, you have to do one chore, which is a very pleasant chore, I'm sure, which is to give a big round of applause to my terrific panel.
Oh, thank you.
Don't miss your flight. Don't miss your flight. Thank you again. Coffee's outside, I think.